Good morning, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well. This is Brian Beeson, Vice President of Marketing for American Team Managers. We appreciate you taking the time to join us on our first in a series of webinars we're going to host in cooperation with Wingman Insurance. We also have Marty Martino here. He's Executive Vice President of Small Business, and it's his department that runs the cyber program.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule for this. Cyber insurance is now the must-have coverage going forward, guys. I mean, everyone's seen these issues that are happening in the news, and us as agents have to now start offering this kind of coverage to your clients. You know, just real quickly, just like owning a home, you know, they have to have insurance. They own a car, they have to have insurance. You know, and your clients that own that small to medium-sized business, well, you know, you have to put them with property liability, workers' comp. But now we're going to have to do cyber. Cyber now is a must-have coverage. So anyway, like Brian said, Ellie Feldman is an expert in this field, and she's going to be talking about the coverages and issues by not having cyber coverage. So this time I'd like to turn it over to Ellie.
Well, thank you, Marty and Brian, and thanks for having me. It's nice to talk to all of you guys and see if I can't get you drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, on why it's so important for you guys to be selling cyber, but also give you some real practical, use them starting today tips on actually converting these quotes into actual sales in your offices. So just as a few housekeeping items before I get started, you'll see on your screen there's a little area for questions at any time throughout the webinar, and we're going to try to keep this to 30 minutes. Put your questions in there. If I don't have time to get to them, I will send a follow-up email with answers to everyone in the group. So keep them coming whenever you have them. So I thought I would start off with a little bit of a story. It's a true story, believe it or not. Imagine that you are sitting at your cube or your desk in your office, and you're working away on your computer, or, you know, making money, doing whatever it is that you do, and all of a sudden your computer screen just goes black. And so for a minute you think, I don't know what's wrong with my computer, and you try to turn it on and off, and you try to reboot it, you try to do all the things that we as normal humans know how to do, and nothing happens. And it's not till then, maybe 3 to 5 minutes later, that you look up and you realize it's not just your computer, it's every computer in your office. What would happen if you had multiple offices and it was happening to every computer in every one of your offices? Or what if it was your floral shop and you no longer had a way to take payments? Well, this particular example I'm giving you happened 1.5 years ago to a little company, a little $5 billion company called Maersk. Maersk, the largest shipping company in the world. And I tell you about a big giant company having a massive cyber breach because this was the first time we saw that it's not just Maersk that's affected when Maersk has a cyber breach. Maersk could not ship any containers for multiple weeks. They were using Post-it notes and Twitter to try to get cartons and shipping crates off of ships in the port of Los Angeles, you know, all over the world, using Post-it notes, because they had no computer systems for weeks because of what we call a ransomware attack. Now, that affected Maersk greatly. I mean, billions of dollars in claims. But who else did it affect? Well, it affected every single person who had a shipment on one of their crates. It affected every single person who purchased from those people because they didn't have access to it. It affected everybody in the supply chain, start to finish, big company, small company. The flower shop needs the flowers just as much as the doctor's office needs the medicine. And it went all the way top to bottom. It affected everyone. And there was lost income across the board. So when I talk about cyber breaches, I want to start at the very beginning and say, We need to look at them as more than just someone hacked into your account and stole your data. Yes, that is a cyber attack, but there's so many more ways that small companies need to be protected from, and a big company that they work with being hacked is just one of them. So, with that little scary story behind us, let's talk about why you need to sell cyber. Well, we just sort of discussed that the risk is broad and it's there for all types of companies, small and large, and we're going to get into some details in a little bit, but just know that it affects every single one of your insureds, whether they know it or not. The second reason I tell people to sell cyber insurance is for their own protection. Let's say you have an insured and you don't offer them a cyber insurance. One of two negative things could potentially happen. One, they have a cyber breach and you didn't even offer them the coverage and they sue you for negligence. That's a hit to your E&O. Or someone else comes into their office and offers them cyber and they wonder why you never offered it to begin with and you lose the account. Neither of those things we want to happen to you. And so we want to arm you with everything that you need right now on a going forward basis to sell cyber to every single account in your book of business. Number three is it's a differentiator. As many of you guys know, it's a complicated coverage. It's not being sold to everybody, even though it should be. And so the second that you walk in and have this in your arsenal, you're automatically in a tier above some of your competition. And finally, and this is one of the more important ones that we'll touch on again later, one of the most common excuses I hear for people not purchasing cyber insurance is either they don't need it or they have some sort of cyber coverage or what somebody else is calling cyber coverage in a bot policy, in a terms and conditions from Verizon, their internet provider, or their person who handles their credit card transactions. All of these things are a myth. Every single one of those things is a myth. And we'll get into more details on that later, but just know that a cyber breach is not going to be covered by a small limit policy, number one, so sub $1 million. And number two, that all of those little disclaimers on the credit card processing things really don't mean as much as people think that they do. And we'll talk about that again a little bit more later. So what kind of companies are we talking about here? Well, we're talking about all kinds of companies. We're talking about the flower shop down the street, the doctor's office. We're talking about the small manufacturing firm. We're talking about a bar or a restaurant. We're talking about food and agriculture companies. We're talking about realtors and construction firms. Think about a realtor. Think about a commercial real estate property and all of the personal data that they have about their residents, the access to their bank accounts for direct deposits on rent, et cetera. Get them and make sure that they're going to be covered. Just as an FYI, there's an area on your screen that says handouts. This one sheet that you're looking at right now and several others are available to you in that. Yes, I will be sending out a copy of the presentation at the end as well. All right, so let's get into the meat of why you guys are actually here. Let's talk about my top 5 tips for actually selling cyber. And the moral of this whole story is a little knowledge can go a long way, and I'm going to try to arm you with it. So if you're going in to talk to a new customer, the first thing you're going to do is think about what their risks might be. And that does not change when you're talking about cyber. Now, I know that the premium size of these is not big enough for you to spend the amount of time you would on anything else. So I'm going to give you the easiest 2 things that you can do to arm yourself and be prepared in under a minute for any meeting in any industry. Now, the cyber risks are different on a general basis based on industry. For example, manufacturing companies don't have a lot of records, but what they do have are networked computers so that if any machine goes down, they can't make anything until that machine is back up and running, and that machine is powered by a computer. So if that computer goes down, you want to be able to pay for that. That's an example. But there's an easier way to do it than thinking through it like that. Every single industry or trade publication in the history of the world at this point has done an article on blank industry and the risk of cyber liability. All you have to do is Google it. If you have a manufacturing client and you type in risks to manufacturing companies for cyber, like 500 articles are going to pop up and you can print it off and bring it with you. I have found that's the most effective way to help people. Everything from car dealerships. There's a trade publication for car dealerships that has done like 10 articles on the massive amount of risk for car dealerships for cyber. They have financing agreements and they have, the monetary records as well as the inventory issues. What if the cars never arrived because, again, they couldn't get off the ship, etc. The second usable tip for this one, and knowing and understanding the risk, is having examples. Claims examples go a long way in helping people know and understand how this could affect them. One of the problems with cyber is people think, oh, I'm not Maersk, I'm not Target or Home Depot. This isn't a risk for me. That's a myth. And so being armed with some examples really helps. On your screen is a website. I hope all of you guys write this down. privacyrights.org. It is a publicly available, totally free service, and you can search all the data in the world on known data breaches. Everything from Home Depot to the car dealership down the street is going to be on there, especially because most of you guys are in California. And anytime there's a data breach, California requires you to disclose it. And so it'll give you exactly what happened, when it happened, how long it took them to get their computers back up, if that's an issue. We can estimate the amount of money it costs them, and I'll show you how we're going to do that later. So I would definitely use both the trade publications and privacyrights.org to get you a general idea for your industries that you're targeting, exactly the data that you need. But Know the Risks has two parts. Knowing what the risks are to a particular industry is one thing. Knowing the general risks are also another thing. The largest number of claims in the cyberspace fall into two categories. Ransomware, which is the example I gave about Maersk, where there's a virus essentially on your computer, a piece of malware on your computer systems, and it locks you out of your systems, and they won't let you back in until you pay a ransom. Social engineering is interesting. It's what we like to call the employee's fault model. Someone has spoofed an email address of your CEO, and he has sent an email with an invoice saying to the accounting department saying, pay this invoice to this bank account. Not even thinking about it, because the email looks like it's coming from your CEO, the accounting department pays it. But it was fraudulent. That email was never sent by the CEO. It wasn't even the CEO's email address. It just looked like it. And how does this happen? Well, you'd be surprised. It happens all the time. So social engineering and ransomware are common regardless of industry. But there are others that are huge claim drivers that are actually eating up the cost of a cyber breach. Business interruption is a big one. And I want to stress this now, and I'm going to stress it again later. Cyber business interruption, which is the largest by cost claim driver for a cyber claim, is excluded specifically from a bot policy. So your customers will never have downtime coverage for lost income based on a cyber breach from their bot. Fines and penalties, public relations. If somebody finds out that you're a data breach, how many of your customers are you going to lose? That leads to reputational harm issues. And of course, fixing the system and getting it back up and running. These are all parts of the risk. It's not just about records. So that's tip number one, know and understand your risks. I'll also tell you that we're going to do a webinar solely on this stuff that I just glossed over. So I hope you guys join us next time, and we're going to talk more about this stuff. So tip number two is be armed with a few statistics. Again, I've given you some marketing materials. The guys at ATM have more if you want or need them that we have provided them. You just let us know and we'll get them to you. But I just want to talk a little bit about a few numbers that'll help you. So let's say your customer comes back to you with, well, I've got this, a little bit of coverage on my bot policy. That should be enough. Here's the number you need to tell them. The average cost per record is $225. And there's three types of records. There's credit card, medical, and personal information. Personal information is everything from an email address and password to a driver's license number, to a social security number. Each one of those data points is $225 to notify, monitor, litigate, etc. So how much would that $10,000, $50,000 of coverage cost them? Do they have more than 50 records? Because other than that, it's not going to even scratch the surface of the costs to the company to actually do something about a cyber breach. A few more statistics for you, and again, I'll get you a copy of the presentation so that you can be armed with these data points in the future. Ransomware, which we talked about, the attack itself, $133,000 a pop. Now, again, this is not even a coverage that's offered in a typical bolt-on or a BOP or anything like that. It's not going to be included in anything from an insurance, from a internet service provider or credit card company. You're only getting this coverage if you buy a cyber policy. Social engineering, which is that employee-based attack, the average cost $382,000 because systems have to be fixed and the money that you paid out, you're never getting back, etc. These are really expensive claims. It is not cheap when you get hit with a cyber attack. Now, why am I telling you all of this? Well, more numbers, but here's the bigger picture. 43% of all cyber attacks target small businesses. That's actually a little low. It's a little closer to 50 as of 2018. 77% of small businesses don't think they have a risk. So there's a disconnect here because 50% of them are having a breach and 77% of them don't think it's going to happen to them. But it is going to happen to them because 50% of all companies reported they had a breach of employee or other information in the past 12 months. And here's the big number, the one that you really need to hammer home and the one that you should take with you. 60% of small businesses who do not have cyber insurance go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. And it doesn't matter if it's social engineering or ransomware or anything else, 60% go out of business in 6 months. It is expensive and they are not prepared. And why is that? What happens? What's putting them out of business? Well, here's the actual average cost of a cyber breach. I will tell you, you're going to see numbers that are much higher than this. IBM and a bunch of cyber people have the new number of a large-scale cyber breach at about $3.2 million. I think that's high. I think it's about $1 million. 872,000 is the actual data breach cost if it was damage or theft to a system. But it's the other column, the additional costs after a data breach, lawsuits, system restoration, public relations messes, business downtime. It can be $1 million unto itself. These are big numbers, guys. And I think if you show them to your customers, they'll start to appreciate that this isn't about you not being target. This is just about spend $1,000 now and you're going to be protected if anything should happen in the future. And that's another tip I think that's really helpful. The market for cyber insurance is as soft as it's ever going to be right now. People are trying to get into the marketplace and are pricing it very competitively for a lot of coverage. Taking advantage of that and getting your customers on a cyber policy now is going to help you in the long run as the costs go up over time. All right, so now that you know the risks and the costs, now we have to know their existing coverage and see if they're already protected. So as I've mentioned about 500 times already, a BOP usually includes some amount, usually in the 50,000 range, of breach notification expenses. And they call it something different. They'll call it cyber coverage, whatever. What they mean is if you have a data breach and records are lost or stolen, they will pay to notify the customers and notify the government up to $50,000. So as we've discussed, if that happens, it's $225 roughly per record. So $50,000 is getting eaten up very quickly. But also, breach notification is not the most expensive claim driver as part of a cyber breach. In fact, it's often that there are no records that are breached or stolen at all. It's a ransomware attack, it's social engineering, it's other things, and none of those things are going to be covered by a BOP. Moreover, it doesn't cover any of the large number claim drivers. Business interruption, and I can't stress this enough, is a huge, huge problem. Imagine that you're a small business and you can't swipe a credit card for 3 weeks, what's that going to do to your bottom line? Are you able to stay afloat? Public relations expenses, fines and penalties, all of these things are important. But the business interruption, as an example, is one that you can take to the bank. First of all, and finally, credit card companies, internet service providers, they will maintain liability for certain aspects of it. But I offered this example for particularly the credit card company one. If you go to a store and they swipe your credit card and the credit card number is stolen, are you suing the credit card company or are you going to sue the store where it got swiped? And the answer is probably both. And so that does not absolve that small business of having a liability in the case of a credit card swipe having a data breach. It's about protecting your customers. And the best way you can do that is to try to at least forearm them with the knowledge that this could be a problem. All right, so let's look back at those risks we talked about earlier. Social engineering, we talked about ransomware, we talked about, are these things included in the coverage that you're providing for your customers? And only you guys can answer that. And if the answer to that is no, we need to start talking about standalone cyber coverage. All right, tip number 4. Be a trusted advisor. And I mean this because cyber is complicated, it is stressful, and people choose to ignore it because they don't understand it. I completely understand that philosophy. So here's a great way to separate yourself from the pack of other insurance professionals out there and do small things that go a long way with customers. Do a every 3-month webinar on best practices for email, not clicking on attachments, things like that. Create a handout to give to your customer about 2-factor authentication and the importance of changing passwords on a regular basis. Follow along with the news and send out email blasts to prospects and clients about current trends in small business cyber. It's little things that you can do that will really make a big difference. If you want some help, we have a blog. Wingmancyber.com is our website. There's a blog on there that has some decent content that we highly encourage you to steal and use for yourselves. I will also tell you that if you want to reblog somebody, Brian at ATM does an excellent job creating content for the ATM's website on this stuff as well. So use that content, become a trusted advisor, and teach your insureds what they want to know. They will thank you for it, and it will put you in a position to really be an advisor to them on cyber. And a little knowledge goes a long way with this stuff. And finally, tip number 5. There's a bigger picture to cyber coverage. And that bigger picture is the following question. If you had a cyber breach today, if your screen went black this minute, would you even know who to call? And oftentimes the answer to that question is no, or maybe my IT guy. Do you have his number? Is it stored on your computer? Because if it is, you got nothing. So the answer to that really is a cyber policy provides more than just the protection. It provides the resources. Should you think you had a data breach, it comes with an hour of free legal counseling to figure out what's going on. They have pre-vetted service providers that can come in and get your client's systems up and running in a matter of minutes. These people know what they're doing, and you wouldn't even know who they are if you didn't have a cyber policy. And I'm gonna just back this up by saying, guys, you're all insurance agents out there, and every one of your agencies should have a cyber policy. Think about how much personal data you have on your agency management system. It's really important to protect yourselves as well as your customers. So now we've looked at the easiest ways to start your impact and get the sale. Let's bring it all together. This is another handout that's attached to this. You guys can download it. There's a fillable one that you can use as well. But this is the best way I can use to summarize sort of what we've talked about. Ask these 4 questions to your insureds so that they can learn and begin to understand exactly what the risk is and if they actually have it. Does my company rely on any digital infrastructure? That includes networked machines, email, credit card processors, anything. Does your company keep any records, and what kind of records are they? do my employees use computers, phones, or tablets? Everybody thinks that one's weird, but there was a data breach about 2 years ago, and a law firm was affected because nobody had access to their email or their iPhones. And for like 10 days, one of the largest law firms in the world was unable to conduct business with their customers on their phones and their computers. Think about how much money they lost. And if that happened to a small business, what would you even do? And finally, as we just discussed, if I was notified of a data breach today, would I know the first thing to do? And the answer is if you have a cyber policy, you don't need to know that. You call your insurance agent and we take care of it for you. All right, and now I have a final bonus, and I would encourage everybody now, if you have any questions, type them into the box. I will do my best to answer them while I give you my bonus tip, which is start quoting cyber on every single renewal. While some people aren't going to buy it in year one, that's completely understandable. The more you talk about it with them, even if it's 5 minutes a year, the more likely they're going to be able to buy it when they need it, or know that they start to learn and understand that they need it. It has the added benefit of protecting you and your agency from an E&O lawsuit, but it also will help you get into the groove of selling cyber for every single one of your customers. All right, questions?
Yeah, hi, Ellie, it's Marty. I have a question. You know, since a lot of our retail agents are small to medium size, what are like the specific industries that you think that they could target almost immediately? Like, I assume most people do some restaurants, they do some bars, they do clothing stores. What else can they?
Yeah, all three of those are good. Anything retail arm, anybody that swipes multiple credit cards a day, that's what we like to call low-hanging fruit. The only fruit hanging lower than retail establishments that need this coverage is anything medical. A doctor's office, a veterinarian's office, a dentist's office. Those records are expensive as all get out, and they think because they're digital and on paper that somehow protects them. It doesn't. Most medical associations and even medical software companies are requiring now anybody in that field to have cyber liability insurance. But I would also say small manufacturing companies, insurance agencies, for any professional services company is also going to need it because there's lots of coverage in here. There's media liability coverage. There's all kinds of coverage that's going to really help your clients feel protected. So the answer is if they have any records at all of any kind, but also if they use a computer of any kind to actually make their money, then they're going to need a cyber policy, if not now, very soon.
Yeah, well, that's great information because, you know, we all know about it, we all hear about it, we all read about it, but we all think we're just small potatoes, that it's really not going to happen to any of us.
That's right. That's right. And it's hard to get past that first hurdle, but once you do, your customers will thank you for it, I promise. And there's just these few little things that you can do to start, you know, whether it be bringing in a one sheet or a fact sheet with a few statistics, or just talking about it when you're in your presentation. I really think you might want this. Or doing a mid-year initiative of sending out a cyber quote to everybody in your book of business and saying, look, we haven't sold this before. I'm now very concerned that you should be buying this. Let's get you on a policy right away. It makes you look knowledgeable and understand what you're doing, but also it is clear then that you are trying to do what's best for your customer.
And Ellie, I've got one agent that on all of their accounts, they have the client actually sign a declination of cyber coverage form to protect themselves. And I think that's great on two fronts. One, it lets the client know that it's a serious cover that they should probably have. Two, it lets the agent have something showing that they did offer that coverage in case it were ever to come back.
Yeah, I mean, we really encourage agencies to have that declination form. Interestingly enough, I've run into an issue lately where if they're not actually providing a quote with that declination form, it's sort of legally unclear if that's enough. But at the same time, it's something. So you got to take what you can get. But I would say the best thing from a protecting yourself as an agent standpoint is if you provide a quote and you have them sign off, no, I don't want this, you're in the clear. And again, it is never going to be cheaper to buy cyber insurance than it is right now. And the coverage is amazingly broad. And so now is a really great time to get your customers on board and really talking about it, thinking about it, while you're able to say to them, what's $600 more of your total insurance bill? Let's get you covered.
Another question real quick, Ellie, a lot of people might not be familiar with is how hard is it to quote a cyber policy?
That's a great question. So I would say I'm a little bit biased because we built a piece of technology that's helping ATM quote all your business really quickly, but it's roughly 6 questions. We need to know their name and address. We need to know what they do. We need to know what kind of records they have and if they've ever had a claim before. And then we need to know their revenue. That's it. So that's all we need to get you a bindable quote on every single one of your pieces of renewal business. So it can be a great initiative. And I know that Brian has a really easy little application that he's designed with all of our questions on it so that you can just get it filled out at renewal for every account.
Absolutely, and I'll make sure that with the material that we've discussed today, I will send out that application to everybody that's on this webinar as well so that they have a copy of it on hand. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ellie, did you see any questions listed?
I don't have any coming in. Do you?
I don't see any as well. So at this point, I think we can probably move forward. And as Ellie mentioned before, all of this information is going to be available to you. We'll make sure if you were on this webinar, we'll give you access to all the slides you saw, plus the handouts that were available. So once again, thank you very much, Ellie, for taking the time to educate us and our agents on cyber. We really look forward to the second series of the webinar and dig a little more into the details. And thank you, agents. I know how busy your schedules are, so I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to join us today.
I've got one more question that just came in. They asked if you can quote cyber by itself. Yes, everything we're talking about right now is a standalone cyber policy. So yeah, cyber all by itself. Well, thank you all as well. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you. Keep your questions coming if you have any, and let me know if you have any specific questions ahead of next time, and I'll be sure to answer them. We're going to be talking about coverage a lot, so I hope to see you all back here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Brian. And there again, Brian will forward the applications out. You guys can fill them out, send them over, and usually we'll get a rating done for you on the same day. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you at the next one.